Well, joining us this morning is State Senator Scott Wiener to talk about one of the hottest issues in the state of California, the housing crisis. In a nutshell, since the recession in 2009 ended, we have added some 722,000 jobs to the Bay Area. Housing, however, we've only added 106 units. Do the math. That's why the prices are so high. The question is the state the right group to try to do something about this by these different plans it has for affordable housing, including the creation of this new idea of a regional agency to handle housing?
Well, I think the state has to be involved to set some basic standards, because unlike every other important policy area, education, healthcare, et cetera, we've traditionally in California said that cities have complete control, can do nothing, can do a little bit, can do as much as they want. And we now have a 3.5 million home deficit in California. It's the worst in the Bay Area, but it's everywhere. And it's pricing people out. It's spiking homelessness. Young people can't get a foothold. So yes, the state needs to step in and not take over, but set some enforceable standards so that all cities are allowing housing.
Okay, but the different cities have different reasons for not building housing. And these are sometimes the same cities that are advocating for housing. For example, San Francisco, your home district, is one of the loudest screamers for affordable housing. Yet every time somebody comes up with an idea for affordable housing, it is met by stonewall after stonewall after stonewall of a process.
Well, to be clear, I've been a critic of San Francisco's approach to housing. San Francisco has to do better. We have built a lot of housing at market rate and low income, but we have to do better. We do make it too hard and too expensive in San Francisco, and so San Francisco needs to streamline and expedite its process. And the mayor supports that, and I support it, but so do other cities. We're all in it together.
Right, but it is this question about whether the state mandates and then the local has to follow the rules. Now, regionally, we always hear about regionalism, and so we're going to create another bureaucracy. I mean, it's kind of ironic, isn't it, that part of the problem for the housing is bureaucracy, so we're going to add another layer of bureaucracy to it?
No, that's not what it's doing. Regional collaboration on transportation, on housing is very important. It acknowledges that cities do not exist in a vacuum. We're all interconnected. San Francisco and San Jose and Orinda and Burlingame and San Rafael, we are all linked together in one job market, and housing decisions in one city affect the costs in other cities. So what this will do, we already have the Metropolitan Transportation Commission for Transportation, which helps coordinate transit funding decisions and road funding decisions. What this will do is allow us to coordinate on funding affordable housing and deciding, do we want to have regional revenue measures, which ultimately won't happen unless the voters approve them. So this is about better regional coordination on housing.
Really quick, when we hear affordable housing and I hear bonds in the same word, bonds are a very expensive way to finance anything. Is affordable housing really affordable, or are we taxpayers just paying more and getting less out of it?
Yeah, to be clear, we need to do two things. We need to allow the private sector to build more housing overall, because we're so short, and for our middle class in particular, the private sector needs to expand the supply, and we need to stop obstructing that private building of housing. But for low-income people, the market isn't going to produce housing affordable to them, and so we need subsidies from the government to make sure that we have a mix of incomes and that people don't become homeless. You can finance that in a lot of ways. You can do it through taxes, so it's being paid up front. Bonds are another way of doing it, but it's all government funding.
You brought up a good point, and I think that's where we stand here. I don't know if this agency is going to be able to help it, but San Francisco wants low-income housing, and they don't want market rate. They say there's too much market rate.
No, we want both. We want both.
And then the suburbs say they want market rate and they don't want the low. And that's why your agency is going to,
everyone needs to do both.
You know, there's a saying in politics that sometimes common sense doesn't seem to make much sense when it enters the political arena. Joining us this morning is State Senator Scott Wiener, who has been an advocate of a new type of law in California, actually kind of bringing back an old one called conservatorship, which is basically people that we see on the streets that are totally passed out, incapable of handling themselves. You want local communities, at least San Francisco, to have the ability to put them in a hospital and to keep them in a hospital. That you passed that by the state, but it's meeting resistance on the local front, and I can't understand that given San Francisco's homeless problem.
Yeah, so a small percentage of our homeless population, and this is not about most homeless people, it's a small percentage of the people on our streets are incapable of making decisions for themselves. They are so severely debilitated with drug addiction, mental illness, that these are the people who are sleeping in their own excrement, who are running in the middle of the street, screaming at cars. They're not capable of making decisions to accept housing and services. So we need to help them, because otherwise they're going to die, and they are dying on our streets. So we make it very hard in California to put someone into a conservatorship, which means that the city or the county would temporarily make decisions for them under judicial oversight, lots of checks and balances and due process. And what this law will do is allow San Francisco, for probably about 50 to 100 people of the most debilitated people on our streets, take temporary decision-making authority, not necessarily to put them in a hospital. It can be to put them in supportive housing with services, but the city will ultimately, at least for a year and maybe longer, make decisions around health care and housing to get people off the streets and save their lives.
Okay, so what is the philosophical and the political opposition to that? Because on one hand, I have the mayor and you advocating for it, but on the other hand, I have members of the Board of Supervisors on the fence, or they don't want to talk about it. Yeah,
so we work closely with Mayor Breed and also Supervisor Raphael Mandelman on this, who have been very supportive. And the people of San Francisco, in a landslide, in the 77% support this. This isn't controversial among the people. Unfortunately, there are people who take very extreme ideological opposition. And listen, I'm very sensitive to civil liberties. We don't want to overuse this. This is not about rounding up people and going back to the bad old days when people who didn't need to be hospitalized were forced into hospitals. We don't want that. But to say that because we all support civil liberties and people being able to make choices about their own lives, that because of that, we're going to allow extremely debilitated people to die on our streets. It's not progressive to watch people die on our streets.
I can understand the argument. What I can't sort of wrap around is that the City Hall doesn't even want to have a debate about it. Well, you know what I mean? They try to keep it just quiet. It just goes nowhere.
Well, there is a debate, and the mayor and Supervisor Mandelman have sparked that debate. There is a pending ordinance at the Board of Supervisors to adopt this program that our bill authorized and to move it forward in San Francisco. So it's a fight in City Hall right now.
Okay, but when we have those fights, whether they're in City Hall or in Sacramento, oftentimes it's some committee, and they just keep it tied up in committee. Well, we need to take another look. We want more. I'm not ready yet. Let's just keep going.
Well, I think it is important for members of the public who want to see a more compassionate approach to helping people off the streets, if you don't think the status quo works, to let your supervisor know that you'd like to see a change and adoption of this, because the people need to let our elected representatives know what they think.
Because on this, yours is a pilot program, and it's to show the rest of the state whether it works or not.
Yep.
And if the first statement out of the pilot program area is, we're not going to do it, then that's the statement being made to the rest of the state.
Yeah, so the bill authorizes 3 counties, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego, to opt in. We need to show that this works. I think it will work. But, you know, this is a change, and so it's controversial.
Odds of it passing?
I think more likely than not.
Not too sure, though, huh?
I'll never say 100% when it comes to City Hall, having served there, but I do believe there's momentum for this approach.